First of all, thanks Heston for giving your time to everyone today, and everyone for attending, as well as taking the time to watch on Facebook. For me personally, a bit of a full circle moment, because I was actually in Heston's platoon, his very first platoon, only for 3 weeks in Bravo Company 2RAR, and before moving on, and obviously his career's gone fantastic because he's now here sitting talking to me, which is really good. So for myself, a bit of backstory. So I was 14 years in the infantry. Did 3 deployments. So I was in 2RAR, then 8-9 RAR, and finish off assisting instructing at RMC, which was excellent. I've now jumped out and manage a company called Effective People, which has sponsored tonight's event, which is a recruitment company here in Canberra with a really strong alignment for corporate and social responsibility that is really tailored to veterans and first responders. So it's a really great thing that we're trying to achieve, and I thank Ian Lindgren and Effective People as well for being involved in this. So without any further ado, the man of the hour, Heston Russell. So I'll give a brief synopsis of what we've got here, a bit of a stat sheet. So ad for RMC, 2RAR Bravo Company, then heavy weapons, conducted selection, went into Special Forces as 2 Commando, and why don't you fill in the blanks there up until your point of discharge?
All right, well, first things first, if everyone's not wondering, these microphones are for the Facebook Live. It's weird for me as well, there's no noise coming out. But thank you so much, Ian, for putting this on, and Effective People, and Chris for having me along. You don't look too different, mate. You're still doing well. But yeah,
a couple of kegs.
Just a few. 72 hours on the man. You're good. So yeah, my sort of career, straight out of school, into ADFA, RMC, 2RAR, and by the time I was then, 25, joined 2 Commando and spent the majority of my time there, SFTC, and then 2017 got back from my last deployment, which was to Iraq. Prior to this, I'd done a deployment to Timor with 2RAR. I did 4 deployments to Afghanistan, and then the last one was to Iraq in 2016-17, and got back, and at that time I sort of had been the good diligent soldier officer and had 120 days leave in my book, plus my long service leave. So I conducted my own transition, which saw me disappear, move myself over to the US, bring a brand called Barry's Boot Camp back over here, and at the start of 2019, turn up to Defence Plaza, tick a few boxes, and that was my sort of transition. Then, I mean, we'll go into it in more detail, but in particular for me, and in the topic of this conversation, that my career was absolutely fantastic. My career was everything I ever wanted it to be and more. My career was the best version of me, and the opportunities I got to have along the way are what made me the person that I am today, and the person that's able to achieve so many things that I can achieve and so much more. And then looking back on particularly my transition from defence, you know, I was of the time in the military whereby I hid every single injury that I could from ever being reported, because I didn't want it to impact on operational capability. 2014, I completely snapped my patella tendon and never got med downgraded, and I've had about 8 surgeries on that ever since, through to everything else in between. And particularly out there at 2 Commando, if ever I had a cough or a sniffle, I had a high performance wing and team, and you know, everything I ever needed to help me maintain my ability to run on and lead the team, essentially. And then come my departure from Defence, or my leave from Defence 2017, I think I was contacted once or twice by the career advisor asking me to come back for another deployment. I just said no, I didn't want to. Then when I finally put my discharge paperwork in sometime in 2018, I was moved to a pool position, carried somewhere in an APAC position, and by the time it was time for me to go in and tick some boxes and do some medicals, that was incredible, trying to find where I was actually carried. And I went in and had my medical. Somehow I had a waiver that meant I didn't need to have a psych screening. And then I spent 2 hours at Defence Plaza being empathised with, and thank you for your service, by a lovely APS member. And then I had an exit interview by a lovely reservist warrant officer who came in and did that. And you know, that was me done. And my, I think I ended up getting my service certificate mailed to me about 2 months later. And it was really sort of fascinating for me. And you know, at that time I was fine, I was happy, I was moving on. I had a great job that had, you know, lots of money, and I was free at last. But I sort of relate this back to, and we'll say this later, you know, customer service 101. You know, you can have the very best dinner at a hotel or the very best stay somewhere, and then on the way out, you know, if someone kicks you in the shin or gives you the finger, or the very minute like mumbles something under their breath, it leaves you with that bit of a bad taste in your mouth. And I guess that's what sort of the first seed being planted of being devalued, and just recognizing that there was just no real, I didn't want anything. I just wanted kind of to be treated like normal. I wanted to feel like, you know, even though I was on my way out, there was something that made me feel a little bit special, maybe. I don't know. I don't think I really asked for too much. And whereas, as we all know, if you have a terrible stay at a place and the food's cold and whatever, but if the person's so beautiful and accommodating on the way out, you establish this personal attachment to them, and you don't, you know, get on Google and write them a terrible review. There's no Google reviews for defence transition. Anyway, my then transition from the defence, I started putting in my admin for DVA, which I'd never done any of them before. And I retired as a Special Forces Major. I prided myself on my ability to be manoeuvrist and tactical in my administration as well as operational actions. And I just encountered roadblock after roadblock, and I filled out, I didn't prescribe the exact condition that would needed to be on my claim, and it was pushed back. And by this time, I think, as per everyone in defence, you start to slow down a bit more once you're out of your transition physically, and things like my knee really started to kick off and really started to hurt and really started to impact my ability to run. And fast forward a year later, it got that bad that I just went off my own pocket to see a sports surgeon that a friend had recommended to, and he asked if I had any scans. I said, yeah, I think I had some, you know, just before discharging, and they're all by med scan, so they're all stored digitally these days, which I didn't know. And before this, I'd been to MLCOA through DVA and had 2 or 3 iterations where they made me walk up and down stairs, and does it hurt if I touch it here? And yes, all that good stuff. And the surgeon downloaded the report, had a look at the photos, and he's like, has anyone spoken to you about this? I was like, well, I've been through 2 or 3 iterations with these guys. It's like, yes, so they've gone through these and looked at you from probably a liability and compensation perspective, but I can see from the report here that you have a 2-centimetre fracture of bone that I could remove in a 45-minute surgery, and you could probably run again. And he's like, no one's looked at these reports from the patient care and how we can actually get you back on the field. And again, for me, I mean, I'm fortunate to sort of backtrack through and do my own backcasting as per I was taught to do in the military. My after-action review we'll come to it later, but you know, there's that next little sort of seed of, you know, potentially 12 months ago, because these were 12-month-old scans. 12 months ago, I could have had a surgery that could have helped me not spend the last year putting on a couple extra kilos, being frustrated by the pain and my loss of movement and all these sort of things, and coming from being essentially in an elite high-performance team where everyone was looking to help get you on the field, through to having to then initiate all of these things and
go through your own channels.
And that's just sort of adding to this devalue piece.
It's a strange thing that you say that, because my wife and I often have a laugh about the way that my transitional service was very similar. I got a phone call, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to make an appointment to meet a bloke in Deakin to get handed my discharge paperwork, which was a bloke that was sitting behind a desk, came out and handed me my little folder saying thanks for your service, shook his hand and walked off. Come 4 o'clock, my wife said, well, is there anything happening? I think there's a bit of a barbecue for you. So I rocked up at the back of the lines for a barbecue, and there was 4 people there, and the only thing that they could say was make sure you got your DVA paperwork sorted. If you got claims, make sure you got your med docs, make sure you got this. And it's kind of, you're spot on the money that we're put in a position constantly, that we've got that care and we've got that foundation to be able to move and progress. But then when that gets cut off, and that's why I believe there's a bit of a gap there with the DVA side of the house when it comes to the claim side, is because we're not getting taught that we need that post-service, and we talk from not so much the officer stream, because there's a bit of nous there, but when it comes to those soldiers that have done, maybe 4 years or 8 years, that go, look, I've done my piece now, I'm going to jump out. It's jumping out, that's the first thing they want to do. But it's when these things start to creep up, like you're saying, that you go to a specialist and go, hey, you've got a piece of floating bone in your shoulder from carrying heavy weights and you haven't had it followed up, that you then have to try and force your way in to get it recognised.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's it. And that was, for me personally, that was quite the epiphany, just really realising that, right, I was, out here making it happen. I thought I was a highly functioning adult, but, I didn't even know how to bloody go and get a Medicare card and stuff like that. And you know, it's stupid stuff. I didn't know you had to go see a GP first in order to get referrals for everything. I kept going straight to the specialists and stuff. And everyone's like, you know, people laugh at me, but you know, I did join the army straight out of school, and I was always looking after others. And you know, I was always had a team around me, and I like to think I'm a smart dude. I could Google this stuff, but it's just, as you can imagine, you're going through all these things, and you're going through these little droplets of sort of not emotional trauma, but we'll talk about resilience in a moment. And then you're trying to deal with these things. It just piles and it piles and it piles up. And you know, particularly for me, I have this context, and we talk about purpose. I know we'll talk about purpose, but my time in the military was the best version of me because I was truly actually selfless, because I had things that I cared more about than myself.
Absolutely.
I had the mission, and as an officer, I had the men, I had my team. And they were my layers of proactive resilience. People talk about resilience being how you respond to falling over. It's like, sure, that's when it actually hits you. But throughout my entire career, I had these rings of resilience and layers of resilience that were my armor around me, because they were the mission or they were my team. And any personal ailment or issue or anything never was too much, because I was always doing it in order to maintain those things.
Yep.
So then when your purpose is just yourself, you know, and you don't have that resilience, you don't have that emotional resilience, every single thing hits you emotionally. Every phone call with DVA that takes 3 months to get back hits you emotionally and actually triggers you emotionally. And I found myself over that 18 months becoming like emotional about everything, and not as in crying emotion, but as in I'd finish a phone call with following up like the surgeon piece with my DVA point of contact, and you literally feel that despair. And this was the first time in my life after 16 years in the military, special forces, everything else in between, where I literally couldn't actually solve a problem. I could not be maneuverist and support and do this. You know, you literally see ways and means that things can be done, but you hear, particularly with my engagements with DVA, there just wasn't the care and attitude there in order to help me to get it done. There was, this is the policy, this is the guidelines, the current waiting period is 18 months, blah, 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 blah.
Absolutely. And as soldiers, we're intrinsically outcome driven. So when you can't force that outcome yourself, then that's why the best way that I could, it's like a beast of burden on your shoulders. Once you get off that phone to talking to someone for 10 minutes that just doesn't get it, or you get this roadblock put up 1,000 times and you feel this weight of burden on your shoulders, like you physically or mentally or no matter what you do, you can't solve that problem. And that's what's driving everyone at the moment, I believe, is that we can't, for people that are outcomes driven, not to be able to force an outcome is horrible, or achieve the mission, so to speak. Yeah,
especially particularly when you know the outcome and you have to wait on someone else's decision to achieve the outcome. A large part of that transition piece for me, as again also go through my backcasting, is realising that I got to a place whereby I just kept handing over my problems to them because I was told that they were the only ones that could do it. And when you get in that reactive mindset, that was the first time I was in that reactive mindset my entire life. That's again where you sit there, and if the reaction coming back isn't the one you want, that's where it hits that emotional layer. But I will say up front, I was my own worst enemy. I was the one who did not put in any DVA claims till I got out. I was the person who think that I could do it all myself. I was the person who did not realise, which I do now, that DVA's primary focus is like liability and compensation. Defence's primary focus is to put the best team on the field that they can each week, and they only have so many spots to do that. That doesn't make it all right. That's where we need to actually be maneuverist, and we'll talk about this later, like as veterans within our community, to help educate those people in service and going through transitions that, hey, look, Defence cares about what you can do. At the end of the day, that's their job. You know, you want them to think that they care about you, and they can and they should, and that's junior commanders and NCOs and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, they have to maintain a capability to support the country. And this is this whole transitions piece. Every single thing that I feel like we can help fix to an 80% standard in the mental health game and positioning and wellness of our veteran community comes down to, you know, preparing people for that transition piece before they're going to transition.
Absolutely.
Having more of these conversations to say, hey, like, you need to get ready. Yeah. Life on the outside isn't the same. And then following through and mentoring people through that process.
The end state, you know, as we look at it, the end state, you know, is we are losing people from the veteran community, daily to suicide. And I know we've got a bit of a shared experience when it comes to the suicide part of the house, and that was with the suicide on deployment. Your first deployment, I think you were 22 years old, a platoon commander, your first operation. Now, how did that sort of first experience, and it's a horrible way to say it, but how did it shape the future experiences? So give us a heads up on how the initial experience, the coping mechanisms, how did you overcome it? And then obviously you've been affected, as we all have, by suicides in the past and no doubt in the future. But how did that suicide set you up, and how did you cope with it? And then how do you use that now as a coping mechanism for suicides that have been and will be?
Yeah, so the first suicide in service and first suicide period I ever encountered was one of my soldiers on my first deployment to East Timor. That was when I was 22 years old. And I say this story, and I'm open and upfront with everything. I thought it was weakness. I was embarrassed. I was annoyed. I looked for reasons, either reasons such as it must be a predisposed thing with people, or I always thought that suicide was something that was predisposed, or something that's obviously happened very traumatic in their life that's redone the wiring. And I came from a very immature place. This was mental health for me was something that older people talked about, or people who had issues. And I
think that was the way back then. That's and that's
what's that, 2007, and I was never, there was no mental health. Like I said, I was never anxious or depressed or stressed. I was just busy. I was never overwhelmed. I was just tired and needed more time to sit down and do things, and that was it. And the fascinating part for me is that, again, I said this before, my time in the military was the best version of me because of the training, the opportunities, the teams, the people, everything else around it. The culture within defence, for the most part, particularly for that 80% of your actual active service career, is one of the best cultures in the world. Absolutely. I say readily, it's the force field that protects us, and the net that catches us when we fall off. And where we're stuffing that up at the moment is in the transition piece. And there's been enough documentation, like the rolling reporting into defence suicide. The last was 2018. It demonstrates that the suicide rate of veterans within service is less than half the community average. Yet once men and women are out of defence, it goes to double or 127% higher between male and females. So when you hear people saying it off at Heston on Sky News and starting to quote these statistics in comparison to everyone else in the Australian public, that is the statistic for me, that we can have a culture within defence that has our young men and women at below half the national average, and then outside defence that accelerates to nearly double. That's frog in hot water. We've got a bloody issue. And that's true to just such a huge number of factors. One, just actually leaving that culture that is so supportive, so mission-focused, so purpose outside of self, so open and collaborative. But the key part is also, as I experienced during my career, there never really was any form of emotional maturity experienced during my time in the career. There was fantastic emotional intelligence, how to pick up on others and whatnot, but I never really felt things properly. I felt passion for my guys and team and mission and what we had to do, but as far as dealing with like my own personal emotions, there was once when I lost Scott Smith overseas in Afghanistan, and there was, there was another time when I had to give up being a platoon commander and the little Peter Pan in me died. But there weren't really times you actually had to properly identify and address your emotions, because you're always looking forward to, and you always had something you're working forward to. And when that stops and you're left with just you and what's left inside, that's the incredible time that I found myself at 33 years old, not understanding how to be in a relationship, how to look after myself without having a team around me, how to find motivation in taking my dog for a walk and not taking a helicopter of dudes out to capture and kill a bad guy.
It's a really unfortunate state of affairs, because I've spoken about it often, where the first shock of a suicide, whether it be veteran or outside the veteran community, just personally, is one that really rocks you. But then unfortunately, and I hate to use this, but veteran suicide for a period there, and kind of still is, has become the norm, to a point where I'd get a phone call from someone whilst I was eating dinner, and it would be a friend of a friend, and said, "Oh, so and so has committed suicide," and you were so dislocated and removed from it that you emotionally didn't engage. You just sort of hung up the phone and continued to eat dinner, and that's a really dangerous place to be in, not only just as a veteran community, but the wider community, where you start becoming so complacent and so it becomes the norm that suicide is there, and you're spot on that as we shape things, it's the transitional phase that causes a lot of issues, but where the issues start. We need to be capturing these people before they're suicidal, before they have issues. And in all honesty, myself, I've never had any suicidal ideations whatsoever. But I have had depression, anxiety, which I didn't realise until I spoke to someone saying, "Hey, you're in a bit of shit here. There's a bit going on, with your mentality. You're changing. You're snappy. You're angry, that you don't realise, and we're catching things too late." In your thoughts,
I didn't answer your question before.
Oh
did I?
yeah, coping mechanisms.
Sorry,
Hit me.
Feel free to bring me back on track.
That's all right.
So I think it's important that my sort of relationship with suicide then, when I was 2013, 2014, one of my former soldiers actually then committed suicide while he was actually overseas on deployment, and I wasn't there, but I was back and I was taking over the role of adjutant. And that guy who we lost to suicide was, that guy that you would have picked on your team any day. He was just so quiet and, so much fun and so talented, and was about to have a young family and all this thing. And that was the first time it really rocked me. I was like, wow, that's not meant to happen. He's sort of the superstar type thing. And that sort of really started to change my mindset. And that was, was that 2013, 2014. And then along the way, we just started to really see a lot of people that I knew and we knew within particular, just around the military, it's 2 points, 3 points of separation, start to, take their own lives or start to really suffer from this. And again, there was nothing that influenced me, but that really started to sort of hit home that there was something going on here. And as I transitioned from defence, as I went through everything we talked about beforehand, and started to lose my layers of proactive resilience and started to focus on my own pains and ailments, and started to enjoy myself in social life, started to really distance myself from my military community. You can imagine, particularly within Command, but in the military in general, when you depart, as we said beforehand, defence is constantly moving forward and has to maintain its relevance and its momentum to keep up with that's capability. And it's like rolling out of or falling out of a moving vehicle and trying to chase and catch up. And it's easier to then do what we do best and blend into our surroundings.
Yep.
And for me, that was blending into, a Sydney lifestyle and losing myself in that, and, the new culture and the new people, rapidly assimilate yourself into that. And then, long story short, I got to a place whereby relationship breakup, all sort of good things. And then August last year, along the way, I continued to lose a couple of guys to suicide. The Burton report was going on. I'd given evidence twice, and they were actually pretty traumatic interrogations in themselves. Yeah. And all this sort of doubt started getting seeded, in particular to that time that I was the best at my career, which was during my time on those deployments. And all this stuff in the public media, and inability to speak out and feeling so small and insignificant and waiting on DVA and blah 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 blah. And long story short, on the last weekend of August, I was sitting at home in my apartment in King's Cross in Sydney. Yep. And I got a phone call from a friend who told me that one of my former team commanders had attempted suicide. And and this is a guy who had a young daughter in the other room, and being in intervention, he's fine. But what it did was it made me sit there on my couch and just go into this place where I literally just put myself in the mindset of, this is the person I'd seen literally stare down death.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just, this is someone who, one of the last people you'd ever expect to again have this. You've seen them live through things that would make other people's toes curl, and then they're at home with their family thinking that the most logical thing to do is to take their own life. And I was like, how does that make sense? Yeah. And I went into the mindset, and long story short, I found myself for about 5 minutes there going into this place of compounding all I'd been through with DVA at this time, and I know this guy had his stuff going on as well. And I was like, well, what is it going to take for people to step up and take notice of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where my head always goes to sort of the information operations or the opportunity sides around it. And I was like, and I just started looking at myself. I'm like, you know, there hasn't really been an officer recently or highish profile that's, you know, committed suicide. Special forces, you know, I had all these other labels that could potentially help me get, at this time I had a social media following and all that, could help me get the cut through for this. And it's a weird thing to say, and I'm not proud of it, but I literally found myself applying my 16 years worth of officer training and planning through to meticulously planning how I was going to take my own life. And I started writing out what I wanted someone like Senator Lambie to stand up in the Senate and say, and I started archiving all the key emails and the correspondence and lack of correspondence I'd had with DVA, and I literally went to a place where I had everything down to how I was going to make sure that my sister didn't find me, and I had a little 18-month mini dash hound, and how I was going to make sure there was enough food out for him until someone came and checked, and you know, all this. And the irony is, at that point, it was actually my dog's dinner time, and he came over and literally just put his head on my lap. And it's so cliche, and it makes me feel sick how cliche it is. But I snapped out of it because all of a sudden I had a purpose outside of self. Something needed me. And you know, the first thing I say this is my first time I ever had a dog, and the first thing I say to any single person transitioning from the military is get yourself a fucking dog. Like literally, absolutely. As far as a 24/7 proactive. Not a cat. No, I mean, you can have a cat if you want. No cats allowed.
No cats allowed.
As far as, you know, love languages, you know, acts of service, unconditional love, all these sorts of things, you know, the dog provides it to me. And I snapped out about that moment, and that was up until that point, I never really had a light bulb moment. And that was my sort of light bulb moment. And I was really, really shocked that for that 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it was, the most logical thing in my head was that I had to take my own life. And it's not as in like a romantic thing. There was literally, you know, I'm used to planning different ways to solve problems and all this. Literally the one course of action was that I had to do this, and my mindset was so fixated and focused on that. And I was embarrassed. I was scared. I didn't want to tell anyone about this. It was weakness. I was like, shit, something's wrong with me.
Absolutely.
And then I read what I'd written out for someone like Senator Lambie to read, and I'd read all these things, and I sort of went back through my analysis of this profile that I thought would achieve cut through. Then it's like, well, how about you use that profile to read your own story?
Exactly.
And I called my mum and I had a chat, and I called my sister and I had a chat, and then I actually had one of my guys reach out to me and have a conversation with me, and that was the first time for anyone from work. It was that next week that I had a chat, and next thing, he sort of cut me off halfway through and started saying, hey, I've had that exact same thing.
It's a horrible...
Well, then I called 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 guys, and they'd all, not as in like, to varying degrees, they'd all had ideation. Some of them had almost attempts. And the more and more people I'm speaking to, it's like...
It's the norm.
People like, why have you never spoken? Why? I asked them, why have you never even said this before? It's like, I just thought I had a moment, you know, something's wrong with me. And everyone's been going through their own shit. And particularly in like this post-2020 world, I think we're so much more culturally attuned and mature with the fact that like mental health is real, and we can't keep saving it for mental health. We have to do mental fitness. But the fact that so many people are having these thoughts is just incredible, and that's part of these conversations, is to break down the stigma. Like, hey, you're actually like normal.
100%.
Like, I still do more push-ups than any of you, but I'm still good to go. Like, you know,
Lucky Lee Campbell's left because he can do some push-ups. Ninja warrior.
That's it, and it's not weakness. You know, it's embracing that empowerment. And you know, if anything, I've never felt more open and authentic and motivated and energized by just simply admitting that, unlike what I didn't want to ever admit during service, I am actually human.
Absolutely.
You know, I held myself to such a standard. We hold ourselves to such a standard in service because it's in the service of our country, it's in the service of others, that we don't have weaknesses because we can work on any weakness to be better, or we wear armor to stop that soft skin weakness. But it was just...
It's almost using the uniform as armor. You know, I think that's one of the things, like when you're
it's an identity.
Exactly, absolutely. And you know, when you're wearing that uniform, you feel 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You know, it's when you take it off that you go, hang on a second. You know, I'm flesh and blood here. You know, it doesn't take a lot to lose a life. And so we fast forward. What systems do you see that are in place now that are creating effect and creating change? And I'm going to leave the stage for 2 seconds. I'll leave you with that. I'll be back in literally 2 seconds. You use a little and blow the nose.
Okay, cool.
So
for sure.
the systems that are in place that veterans can rely on now.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me as a part of that sort of process was, this was end of August last year, then into September. And what I then literally did was just sat down. I didn't sat down with a pen and paper, but over the last few months and just having more and more conversations, I've been able to sit down and sort of backtrack and backcast how I got to that place. And, it's from those little elements of what are essentially like emotional trauma, realizing that I wasn't as valued as I thought I was, even at a baseline level, dealing with my transition from defense and DVA, through to, my ability and my own actions and attitudes in rapidly adapting myself to the culture I created around myself. I literally write down a list of values. When I was November Platoon Commander, Afghan 2012, I was at my greatest because I was truly selfless. I actually didn't care anything that happened to me. If I died over there, it was fine because I just wanted to make sure my men and the mission and nation were safe and acceptable and best represented. I was responsible. I wasn't in command of these guys. I was responsible for them, and they were the most amazing people who challenged me. And if anyone here is like, been in charge of a team, and at that point in time we'd been together for nearly 2 years, and responsible for a team that you finally get to see go out there and play in the grand final, and you don't even need to say half the things because they're already doing it and working together and coming back and just being so happy. Like it's incredible. It just inspires you to be the best version of you because you are responsible for them and you want to live up to their standards and expectations. I was never ever entitled. I was responsible. I was selfless. I had so much responsibility, not only for them, but for my country. I was required to demonstrate physical courage, and it wasn't like I sought out and accept that. But, when you're actually able to test your own physical abilities and not worry about those things, it was exceptional. And then through to when I then quickly did what I do best and rapidly assimilate to the culture that was my young partying Sydney life after defence, I became entitled. I started to look to see, what I could have to make me feel valued because I needed that, because I had no intrinsic motivation. I needed these extrinsic things to make me feel valued. I didn't have responsibilities outside of myself. My purpose was myself. I became selfish. And I, in particular, surrounded myself with people and a lifestyle and a culture that supported that which became my personal ethos. And along the way, I knew subconsciously that wasn't who I should be. And I distanced myself from my community, not only because I didn't fully understand what they're up to and they didn't at all understand what I was up to. I put up barriers to help any of my really close mates reach out to connect with me. Yep. I was not being able to actually embrace and love myself, and at the same time further and further distance and isolated myself from the community. I didn't even go to the first Anzac day after I got out because I, didn't openly not connect with my community, but I just felt that I didn't need it. I felt I was moving on. I was enjoying everything that was different in my life. I was feeling things. I was enjoying things. I was finally enjoying myself, and I surrounded myself with people who were there to get things out of me instead of me have friendship in return. And you just build this environment where one day, you look around, you're just like, how the hell did I get here?
Exactly, and it's a thing like we're going to continually touch on as purpose. And you talk about Anzac Day, and my wife often tries to drag me along to the War Memorial on Anzac Day, and I find that time there is a personal reflection time. It's not that I don't want to go to the service. I go and do my own thing, and trying to find that purpose for me was hosting an Anzac Day event, which I do regularly at one of my mates' bars at Siren Bar in Gungahlin. Regularly, I'm there doing Anzac Day, or we're doing a barbecue there, or things like that, just because my personal belief now is finding that purpose is helping others or providing awareness of others. So that's my purpose, but it took me a long time to get there. And I was very in a similar boat when I got out. I was reckless. The only place that I'd really sort of open up is the footy club, after having a few drinks, and it got to a point where it was almost self-destructive, because I keep so much in. I'd open up in front of the boys for the footy club, and they would become my new army, so to speak. That would be my new service life, that I was being so detrimental at home, and literally I was self-destructing and trying to create conflict and cause conflict, because that's what I was so attuned to. I needed that motivation. I needed something to fight at. And once again, like I did 3 trips to Timor, and you can't really classify that when you look at yourself as a combat deployment, but still that just intrinsic value of wanting conflict. I found it so hard to come back to a status quo where I had to not seek that conflict out. It nearly destroyed me and nearly destroyed the marriage. It wasn't until you wake up and you go, hey, this is real life. You're not wearing a uniform anymore. The way this goes is one way or another.
That's it. What you're saying, you're operating off emotions.
Yeah.
As opposed to where our emotions were deep down, that intrinsic motivation or that extreme motivation that could push through, and that passion, it becomes the first default fuel. And when you're operating off emotional energy, you're not operating with logic. One quick point I'm just going to jump on and segue, particularly for people at home. At the moment in the veteran community, there's all these conversations, and I know it's like, am I a veteran, am I not a veteran, all these sort of good things. I never did combat service, I never went overseas. This is the number one thing that is life according to Heston Russell, and I'm going to bash everyone over the head with it, so please excuse me with it, but everyone is a veteran if you signed up for service. You signed up for uncertainty. You signed up for a story yet to be written, and that story could have had of us, engage in state-on-state conflict, or that story could have had of us do absolutely nothing. The best example I had going through my life is my father joined as a bombardier, then went through ports and became an officer, and he served 20 years and achieved 1 rifle company rotation to Butterworth, and then he got out. And then we moved up to Brisbane. He and my mother divorced, and then he got back in a few years later, and after that I think he did 2 trips to Iraq and 2 trips to Afghanistan, and you never get to choose your adventure. You get to choose whether you volunteer for service. You get to choose whether you put yourself behind others and a purpose and a team. So all these conversations about am I a veteran, am I not a veteran, am I a young veteran, am I an old veteran, we're all veterans, and the one thing we have in common is service. The fact that we volunteer for service, where our country decided for us to go after that, whether we went on active service or not, particularly as we're coming to these conversations for Anzac Day, we have to join together with the bare fact that we know what it's like to put something before ourselves and do that with pride. And we have to connect on that, because the biggest pet peeve I have is veterans are the very best support for each other, but we're also the very worst enemy at the drop of a hat, and we're so conniving with each other. Whereas united, we stand to hold such power and leadership that this country needs at the moment, coming out of 2020 and everything else in between. Just carry that word veteran with pride, if not for yourself, but for the people that you represent, and that attribute of volunteering for service that we have to celebrate.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Cool.
NRAN. That's good. That's a good one. And you're spot on the money. It's something you get bantered around a lot. What is a veteran? A veteran's anyone that served. In my eyes, it's that simple. You sign that dotted line. It is what it is. As we progress, obviously we've touched a little bit on veteran suicide and things like that.
Coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms.
I want to just quickly say it was so imperative for me coming out of and I'll say recovery, recovery from that place where I shocked myself that I knew that I could actually take myself to want to commit suicide. I really went through a process of identifying where I was at my best, and that was during my life in service. What were those values I needed to get back to? Being selfless, being responsible, looking after myself, surrounding myself with those people who actually shared, if not my purpose, at the very least those values that I needed in my life.
Yep.
And unfortunately there's 1 or 2 people that were my friends last year and they're my friends this year, and I really reinvested in my family, those who actually truly got me and understand me, and not realizing I didn't need to be popular. You just need those people who actually are there and able to support you when you need it. And get yourself a dog, it's fantastic. But and then getting back into things like our routine, taking control. The biggest funny part for me was I didn't think I had the ability to do so much of this stuff because I wasn't responsible for anyone. I've spoken about that before, and I know
besides the dog.
Besides the dog, that's it. I know it's a unique situation, but particularly for me, I was always from a young age responsible for others or training to be an officer and all that. And I sort of got myself in this mindset that without, you know, having a position or a rank or authority or people, you know, I was unable to actually adequately, you know, do what I needed to do or have the requirement to do what I need to do. And then it just actually came down to, you know, leading myself.
Yeah.
And not looking to lead, but just looking to be the best at what you're doing. And in doing so, you end up leading by example 9 times out of 10. But it was just such a weird little epiphany for me, realizing you don't need authority. You just need an authentic purpose. And an authentic voice carries its own authority. And it's been so critical for me to realize that I literally have been for so long handing over my problems to others to solve, where I was taught in defence to be able to solve any problems or find a way or build a team or do that. And I was literally the only person holding myself back and awaiting these things to be dictated, as to appreciating, you know, DVA is what it is. I'm sure we're going to talk about it. There are these problems that are going to keep going on over here, but you need to get on and keep forging your life and allow those things to catch up to you.
Yeah, and we've got, and that's the way that it rolls. We've got things now that we've got mechanisms in place to try and assist people. And, you know, we speak about DVA and open arms quite openly. And I feel, without degrading too much what's going on, but a lot of the time, especially with the long wait times, for instance, you know, it's a common complaint when we're talking about DVA that there's long wait times, there's long compliance and legislation that we have to jump through just to say to a veteran, hey, yeah, you know what, your service has caused these issues. I also think that's a massive mechanism for some of the suicides we see. And if you don't think so, then you're burying your head in the sand. What's your view on DVA and open arms and the way that they're purveyed? What are they doing? What aren't they doing? And how can they be better without crossing any lines, so to speak?
Gotcha, absolutely. I mean, look, like I said, I was my own worst enemy by not actually doing the due diligence. But to be honest, like, I never got exposed to anything of like, what do we need to do with DVA? And, you know, even one of the recommendations I pass on to people is, as an officer in the Army, you go to your promotion courses, grade 2, grade 3, like, whilst learning how to do a DFTA charge, we need to be learning like how to put in a DVA submission for our guys. Like 101.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, as a platoon commander, I loved being responsible and working with my Bravo for the admin of my guys to make sure that they were always catered for before I went home. That's such a huge part of it, and people need to get better aware of how to do that, the fact that it's not going to impact on their service, but you need to do it while you have that culture still around you and that team still around you in service.
And the knowledge as well.
Absolutely, sorry, what was the question again? Heston
DVA, cool. Open arms, what's working, what's not? So, you know, how can they be better, and can we assist them in any way of being better?
Following my moment, I put together, following my ideation, I put together an email and sent it out to a number of people. I sent it out to my local member, Tanya Plibisek. I sent it out to Senator Lambie. I sent it out to Andrew Hasty, who's a friend of mine. And I got good varying responses, and long story short, about 2 weeks later, I had a video call with Liz Cousins, and it was meant to be Darren Chester, but instead it was one of his staffers. And I sort of went back through and told Liz and all that, everything, and, you know, she responded extremely well. And 2 weeks later, another 2 weeks later, I had a round table teleconference with her, Don Spinks, the head of Open Arms, the head of everyone else in between. And I went through it, you know, and someone was brought to tears, saying, you know, it really sparked how my energy back into supporting our veterans, and we're going to have you come down to Canberra. And so then I came down to Canberra. This time, this was the 16th of October. And between the first call and the second call, Brodie Page, we lost to suicide. And I did my selection and reinforcement cycle with Brodie, and Brodie left behind 2 young children. And this was, again, in between these 2 periods. And as a part of the first conversation with Liz, I sort of said to her, like, hey, we need to do more like proactive reaching out. Like, one of the key things that I'd already identified is that, you know, I haven't heard from anyone from defence since transitioning over 1.5 years ago. Not even how you doing, man? And I was like, if that's like not even happening to me, like that's not happening to anyone. I'm like, we need to, and also with everything that was going on and sort of mapping my critical case, essentially. I went to her and I have these emails like listing, you know, just like we're searching for a car or a house on realestate.com, you know, these are the filter requirements. And then I read back through the the last rolling inquiry into veteran suicide, I read back through the Jesse Bird coroner's report.
Yep.
You know, particularly the rolling veteran suicide report identifies what is the high risk category. You know, men and women under the age of 30, 35, mere discharges, or at least a single deployment overseas. You know, 2 to 5 years separated from defence. Have ongoing DVA paperwork. Let's put those search criteria down, and then I included in this, have been or involved with the IGADF inquiry.
Yep.
You know,
yep.
have done multiple combat deployments.
It's like combat indicators.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? I was like, hey, you know, these are some things that I would love to work with you. And at this time, I'd started up sort of Voice of a Veteran, which was again just there was just an identity I needed to not put myself out there.
Don't skip ahead on the run sheet, mate.
But I had a whole bunch of people, particularly within the Special Forces community, reach out and say, hey man, yeah, lots going on with this Veteran Report piece. We'd love to, if you can get DVA to want to do some proactive outreach, be a part of it.
Yep.
So then, you know, I proposed to Liz, we can do these things, and it's like, yeah, we'll discuss it when you come down 2 weeks later in Canberra, and then we lost Brodie, and I was like, cool, like things kind of need to happen now.
Yep.
I'm not saying that could have been saved, but as we sort of know within the community, in service, if something needs to be done, like, we can find a way to do it tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We can. And that was a great lesson for me. Again, instead of proposing these problems up, get out there and start doing it yourself. So from there, I started trying to contact as many of my former guys from my platoon that I could, and that's where more and more of these stories came out. And it was so therapeutic for me contacting them and re-engaging with my community. Most of it was just by the phone, but as you know, you're just jumping back into conversations of good times, bad times, everything else in between, and just, it was this therapy that I'd been missing, and no psychologist could ever invest with me.
It's the thing that's happening now is the more that these things get politicised, and we'll touch on the Royal Commission and everything, but the more it gets politicised, the more and more it's touched from DVA at the moment, with the trust and the faith and everything like that, the less gravity it holds with the veteran community. And the reason that is obviously because it's not political point scoring as such, but there's no trust and there's no faith there, and it's time now for a veteran-led initiative. And I know there's heaps of, like, we'll discuss ESOs and things shortly, but it needs to be a veteran-led initiative that's dragging the veterans along. Veterans helping veterans.
Veterans supporting veterans is not only so therapeutic and cathartic, it's like what we need, and there's that assumed trust. But, you know, when I went down and met with Liz and the whole team, including, you know, Stu Smith, who's just been brought in, and all this, you know, fantastic, great high-level stuff, but not much actual tactical implementation. I sort of had a lot of these questions, and I'm adamant, like, they were the right people that I met in that briefing room and had these conversations with. But then it's just when you continuously don't see action followed up from it, you know, and then 4 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, the Burton report was released. You know, and it had things like...
Just an interject. You'll never meet someone so interested in the Brereton report than my grandfather. He's Inspector of Police down in Victoria. Yeah. And every time I'm on the phone to him, any updates on the Brereton report, mate? I said, I don't know, I run a recruitment company.
Yeah, love it.
I know what you know.
I mean, we can... I don't want to...
Don't have to delve into it. Don't worry about it.
But this was part of the thing that I went down on the 16th of October, and I said to Liz and her team, hey, I have about a dozen Special Forces guys who want to link in with Open Arms, and if not, work with you to put the search criteria and start proactively outreaching to these people at the moment. I didn't know the Brereton report was going to be released that soon. I just knew something needed to be done now, particularly off the back of Brodie and what I was going through, I had gone through. And even things through to like, hey, if you get a call from someone within SOCOMAR, please feel free to like send them my number or give them my number. I'd love to link in with, and I could bring a bunch of people to you at Open Arms who surely we can do some form of via correspondence training to at least bring us up to a level where we're not, you know, trained therapists, but able to actually have conversations, make sure at least you know what happens if the person hangs up the phone, the person does this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was there with Steph Hodgson, the head of Open Arms, having these conversations, and, you know, these are great things, these are written down, blah, 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 nothing. You know, and this is where I start going, look, the worst thing you can do to me is give me hope that something's going to happen. And then not follow through, and even worse is, give me hope that you're going to do it so I don't do it myself, and then I see nothing. Like, that's when you really get off my Christmas card list. So it happened again, and then the Burton report release happened, and things like removing the citations, which immediately no one recognised, included like 20 fallen veterans. Yeah. And the one thing I was linked in with them, and straight away I'm on the phone to Ray, I'm like, mate, like, how are you? Have you heard from anyone? He's like, mate, I haven't heard from anyone. And that's where I'm, again, just like, you know, my planning mindset kicks in. And it's like, if we really were caring and thinking about how these things are going to affect people, like, someone should have already been linking in with these families before our chief stood in front of the entire Australian public and said these things. You know, he knew he was going to say these things. How do we not even think to put those safety mechanisms in place? Like, that could have triggered a family, like, and it did.
Absolutely.
It triggered families.
Absolutely.
And anyway, then I messaged Liz. I messaged her and I said, hey, Liz, what is going on? Ray has just spoken with me and I haven't been contacted by anyone. It's like, oh, you know, this is a response, Heston. We're going to be reaching out to all those families that have updated their contact details in our database. That was 4 families. 4 families. I was like, Liz, every other media agency in the country is able to contact them. You share the same building as the ATO. I fully appreciate that there are privacy requirements, but there is a ways and means we have to work together to support our people, and I will happily work with you to do that. And I keep getting met with either inaction or reasons why it can't occur. And for everyone else's, you know, I am so adamant, unfortunately, now that, like, a Royal Commission will unfortunately take a lot of capability out of DVA who needs to be doing their job. But at the moment, I'm butting my heads up against the wall so hard that until we see an independent body that has to be a Royal Commission happen, I can't support anything else. You know, this National Commissioner is an outcome that would be found from a Royal Commission. And I'll put this in context for this crowd as well. After you've all heard, you know, probably seen me in the media ranting and raving, and you've probably heard most of that in regards to the Burton Report, but I founded Voice of a Veteran before in order to give me a platform to speak out and have the confidence to speak out on these mental health issues. And I made the front page of a newspaper article, and my first appearance on Alan Jones were all talking about my experiences and failings with DVA. On the 8th of September, so 10 days after, or 9 days after my suicidal ideation and engagement with the government, my determination for post-traumatic stress disorder and for adjustment or disorder with blah, 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 depression finally came through approved by DVA on the 8th of September, which was just, you know, fascinating in itself. And as I backcast on my narrative, how bad would that have looked if I had followed through with my suicide and then a week later, you know, maybe we would have actually had more progress. And I don't say that flippantly, it really still unfortunately does feel that way. And then, you know, you would have all seen how much I've been in the media and all that good stuff. And yet still, as I was saying to these guys before, last week, there was a veteran review board that sat for a review of my physical ailments and injuries, and as a part of that, they requested back to DVA for the progress on the permanent impairment determinations on my PTSD and adjustment disorder, and nothing was received. So I had to personally reach out to DVA, and after 2 days worth of phone calls, I was told that something had gone wrong in the system back in September, so 5 months ago, and my claim for post-traumatic stress disorder and adjustment disorder, the first 2 ever mental health issues for me, haven't progressed. And I just got a lovely email yesterday saying, our apologies, something has gone wrong in the system back in September. For 5 months, your mental health claims have not progressed. There appears to be an error in the system. Retraining will be occurring in that department. And we want you to know that, you know, we value your service, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just literally, this is why, like, if they can't even get my shit right now, like, you know, I don't want special treatment, but, like, do yourself a favor when you have, like, the loudest person out there who can be if they did the right thing tomorrow, I'd be their biggest friend. I'm here to get in-state results. But if they can't even progress my stuff after 5 months, that is in the most public way, my issue is that I know that they're not supporting a soldier or a sailor, an airman or an airwoman. And as an officer, that's where it hits me deep down, knowing that you can't even get my shit right. So that's why I just have lost trust in the ability for these organisations to mark their own homework, to have any form of anything that isn't an independent Royal Commission look into this. And I can't look past that when I keep seeing it occurring time and time again. And when it's happening to me, it's happening to so many others. And as you said beforehand, I'm fortunate enough to be able to, like, voice these things. And in voicing this is therapy for me. But I remember where I was on my couch on 30th of August, and I never thought I could speak up.
Yeah.
I didn't have this ability to get these emotions off my chest, and it nearly made me want to kill myself.
And that's the thing, you know, like that's why we're here having these discussions, because I guarantee there's people sitting in Facebook, and I know of people that are just sitting at home, you know, that don't have a voice, that can't speak out. And if it's happening to yourself, or, you know, I know it's happened to me, and some of my claims were extremely lengthy, you know, then the end state is what we were talking about, is suicide. You know, you feel like you've lost support, you feel like you've lost your purpose, and the one thing you were fighting for, no one's listening to you. And it's horrible for that to fall on deaf ears. Yeah. And as we move forward, so you spoke about it briefly, about the Royal Commission versus the National Commissioner. Now, yeah. I know some of and you'll be able to elaborate more, but some of the issues that were struck up with the Royal Commission is they will only look at the incidents that have happened in the past. And not look towards the future. I don't think that's correct. I think in order for us to realise how we're going to rectify change is obviously to look into the past and therefore create the lessons learnt to enact the future. What's your view on the Royal Commission? I know it's highly politicised and publicised at the moment, but if you want to give us a quick Heston Russell Soldiers 5 on the National Commissioner versus the Royal Commission.
So I like to break it down to like what is the actual effects required on the ground, what is the end state needed, and we're at a point whereby, whether you say the number's 500, we know the number's more like 700 since 2001 that we know of. There are over 700 veteran suicides that require accountability, that require recognition, and that require respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Concurrently, there is absolutely the need to immediately implement the recommendations that are already sitting there in black and white, combined with listening to those, like myself, like others who have actually been through these times and want nothing more than to contribute to help solving the problem, to stop one more person from doing this.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, when I break it down to, and what I am learning every day from politicians and lawyers and everything else in between, the best ways and means in order to achieve those with the right level of integrity and to put enough trust into those for the community to be able to move on from the scars that have been caused by this is a Royal Commission. It doesn't come down to the same powers as a National Commissioner. It comes down to the independence of that organisation to be able to do what it needs to do.
Absolutely.
Then it's up to the government of the day to, again, accept those recommendations, but particularly with the climate and culture and the controversy this story has drafted already, that's not going to happen. Yep. And I've met with Dr. Boss, and I sat in the round table with her in December last year in Sydney, and she is the right person to be doing that job. But she has just been put in the middle of this as, again, what I keep seeing happening, and as we saw in defence, the continuing focus of capability where there actually needs to be that diligent review process to win people's trust back into the system. So
it's cause and effect. Right now, it's the decision, and Ian, you touched on it earlier. It's not, we're so busy not making a decision that it's clouding clarity. You know, we need to say, hey, I don't care what the decision is, let's make one and then let's move forward and try and create change. I think that's where it sits right now, that the longer that we don't have action and it keeps getting bounced around and passed around like a basketball, you know, more suicides will happen, more people will get into the hole, more people will have to be brought out of the hole, and it creates a whole cloudy water for anything to do with veteran suicide or veteran mental health.
Well, that's it. The transition process in itself, you know, in the military, we have a course for everything. You know, before we go overseas, we do specific training, we do mission rehearsal exercises. There's none of that for transition.
Absolutely.
You know, be that the natural progression of the transition out, and even just breaking through that, which is happening, that cultural change that, you know, at some stage, 90% of the force is going to leave defence. And the role of defence is to defend Australia's natural interests, but it has to be in order to also produce better Australians. Because, you know, every veteran has the capability to be an outstanding Australian. They just literally need the mindset and motivation and some fundamental training to be able to go on and excel. We're just not doing that because it's not a focus and a capability. And that's where I hope this Joint Transitions Authority steps up. And then it's the DVA in itself, and it's again just that recognition and consolidation of the capabilities that is DVA, and providing some form of a human buffer, but so making sure that no veterans engage directly with DVA in its current form, because there's no focus on care and communication. And for me, the best thing I've done is, I'm on to my third one now, is just to get an advocate and unload that emotional baggage. Appreciate it's going to take a long time, but again, you know, if someone had have spoken to me during my transition piece, as opposed to, oh, you didn't tick the box that says you haven't filled your DVA. So say, hey man, it's going to be painful. Get someone to do it for you. Remove yourself off that baggage. Get out there and get it done. Like, it sounds like stupid stuff, but if you don't know what you don't know, And as soon as someone says that to me, I might not believe it to start off with, but then someone's already said it to me by the time I realise it is hopeless.
Yeah.
And it's allowing me to feel like, hey, it's not just me. This system isn't just against me. I'm not just stupid at this, blah, blah, blah,
Absolutely.
blah, blah.
And you look at it, like I look at it now in the corporate world, and we talk about things like sales funnels. You know, that sale process starts at the first contact, which is generally 6 months before someone buys something at a long engagement. And that's what we've got to be doing here with veterans, is that transition. The transitional phase doesn't start the day that they discharge. It starts 6 months prior. We need to be capturing people's purpose and what they want and doing regular updates prior to them leaving, so then we can feed their purpose once they're out to stop them from self-harming or stop them losing that purpose, which is the ultimate thing.
Well, it's got to start from the day you join.
Yeah, exactly.
So I spent a year on exchange to the US, and I've spent a lot of time working with them, and they have everything from their GI Bill, they have their pathways, they're sort of tracking your skills and development as you go throughout your process. And transition seminars and having recently transitioned veterans coming back in and provide briefings need to be given to everyone.
Yep, absolutely.
Just to help people learn. We do professional military education. We need to do professional life education
Absolutely.
along the way. It needs to be marketing 101 from people who are relatable and or aspirational to the different demographics within defence, not just, again, broad brush.
Absolutely.
And the funniest part is that mobilising the young veteran community, the recently transitioned veteran community, is the best asset we have at the moment, because all of us would do it free of charge and drive ourselves there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so therapeutic for us to, again, know that we can contribute back to capability in some way by helping these people be prepared to be better Australians.
Absolutely.
We would love nothing more than the word veteran suicide to be removed from the media, because that is not us. I am not a victim. I am someone who went to a place through my own hand and the support of others as well. But every other day of the week, like, I'm ready and good to go, and call me up, boss, I'm in. But
it's and you're right, like that veteran suicide side of the house, like it's, I take, offence is probably the wrong word, but every time you hear the term veteran suicide, it strikes a chord. It doesn't matter, and we spoke earlier about what a veteran is. It doesn't matter, like it's mates losing mates, and that's the thing. It's families losing family.
Literally knowing, again, what, particularly when it hits home to so many veterans, like seeing these people that you've seen perform at their best, and it just feels, knowing that these things can be done and seeing it written report after report after report, you just start banging your head. And the key part is, for me, for every veteran that we lose to suicide, there's 10 more that have attempted suicide. There's 100 more that are living with these thoughts and doubts and have had these ideations. And I sit up here having these conversations, trying to break that down to help people feel more normal.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if I sat there by myself having my own ideation, you literally sit there thinking, shit, I'm a risk to myself. It's like, I'm not. I'm better than I am ever been now, just accepting that I had that sort of moment. I take medication for depression and anxiety and all these sort of things. It's you've got to heal from, these mental injuries.
Totally.
It doesn't sideline you, but you can't sit there and see the wound heal or feel the movement come back, but it's just a slow and gradual process, and it's so much better, like, having it and experiencing it together.
Absolutely, and I know it's a bit of a hot topic, the veteran suicide. Before I jump into the next issue, does anyone have any questions from the floor or want to raise anything with regards to veteran suicide? No, sweet, excellent. Usual response. So the next topic that we're going to touch on real briefly, and I know it's been a bit of a hot topic and we've had some traction, which is fantastic, but Anzac Day. Now, we've spoken about, we've seen in the media that Anzac Day getting cancelled and things like that. The Heston Russell 101 on Anzac Day, where's it at?
You just got me up here to rant, didn't you?
Absolutely.
So look, Anzac Day is a symbol. First and foremost, in the veteran community, I really want people's feedback on this. For me, Remembrance Day is a day in which we remember our fallen formally as a nation. Every day if we've lost a mate, there's something that might make us remember them. But Remembrance Day is where really, and by the definition, by all wars and conflicts that are represented in our country, Anzac Day for me is really thinking back to, and is really about that Anzac spirit, and thinking back to that landing at Gallipoli. We don't celebrate a military disaster. I put my brain in the context of, I lost Scott overseas in Afghanistan in one of the most, horrific ways you'd ever expect to, and being in contact and all that sort of good stuff, and you try and think you might have some perspective, but then you think back to what it was like for, these guys landing on the shores of Gallipoli, and within a blink of an eye, thousands of people
absolutely
have been
horrible,
cut down in front of them. And then for those that were then exposed to like literally hell on earth,
Yeah.
you know, it's not only hell on earth for fear, but like, you know, there's emotion everywhere in like half the people that you knew have already been cut down, then drew on every ounce of themselves to literally fight up the hill.
Yeah, go again and go again.
Go ahead and do that. And for me, that's what Anzac Day is. It's remembering that spirit that in the face of absolute horror and disaster, those people, those veterans before us, took it upon themselves, every ounce of, you know, what we would like to see some form of ourselves in them, to push forward and do that. And then again, for me, drawing that back through, you know, I lost my grandfather December last year. He fought in Korea, he fought in Vietnam, and you know, he tells me these stories, same, and drawing that lineage of those moments we have seen our veterans, our soldiers, our mates be outstanding in the face of fear, in the face of evil, demonstrate that courage, be that physical or moral courage. And then again, when I talk back to losing Scott, and I actually draw from then watching some of my soldiers, then, you know, you could see they were hurting, but we were in contact for the next 3 hours and watching them just put that emotion down for the time being and fight on magnificently.
Move forward,
Like that's what I look to Anzac Day. I look to drawing back that lineage of that courage and using that to then inspire actions moving forward, and as a sign and a beacon of hope and all those things that only under extreme adversary, under extreme pressure, under extreme fear and danger, can we draw forward. So anyway, long story short, that's why we march together, we join together. That's why, you know, for Remembrance Day, in the morning we have the dawn service, which is when we commemorate those of the fallen, and then essentially we have the wake afterwards, which is us commemorating and celebrating that service and that sacrifice and making sure we use it to then fuel our actions forward. So last year, you know, our nation was on lockdown, the world was on lockdown, so we did what we did best and we made sure we abided by that.
Did something still, you know, there's still something there.
That's it, particularly at a time when, you know, uncertainty, isolation, and that loss of purpose are key things already whittling away. And then over the last year, we've, you know, definitely seen plenty of Australian citizens break away from those sort of things. And we're at the point now where I feel we've done really well and we've got large sporting events and everything else going on. And then the announcements around Anzac Day, you know, Melbourne's already cancelled, Hobart's already cancelled, and this is where my planning headset goes on. We've got, you know, 10 weeks to get this done. Don't tell me we can't do it. We could do this overnight.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things like you talk about. So we talk about veterans, but you know, when it comes to Anzac Day, it's not just veterans. You know, it's families of veterans. You know, it's the wider community that need to stand up and go, hey, we're not taking that. You know, I had for instance, you know, you got a family of a veteran that had a rallo in World War II. You know, stand up and go, well, I don't care. I'm going to go march, or I'm going to do this, because obviously, do it practically and don't cause a ruckus, but do the right thing. You know, it's a sign to remember. I
had a fantastic email the other day from a lady who's not a veteran herself, but she was talking about what she commemorates and celebrates on Anzac Day. It was when the men went away to fight and demonstrate that Anzac spirit that I spoke about beforehand. It's then when the women took over in the factories,
absolutely,
put on a red cross. It's when those families came together and sent letters and care packages over. Anzac Day is when we join together as a family. Remember the spirit that goes into, you know, sending and serving our men and women overseas as well.
Absolutely.
And it's that time that we truly unify. It's within society, there are not many true and authentic purposes. I did a conversation with Ian Thorpe the other day, and our military forces have been that pillar of hope that has really been a true and authentic thing, because our men and women go and do what a government tells them to do. They're not doing it because they've decided to do it. They decided to volunteer. And there's something just so pure about that service that people can rally behind, regardless of what, you know, putting themselves in harm's way. And the second is sport. You know, when people are out there and actually doing, their actions are speaking, and, and it's really up against either team could win, things like this. That's why our sport and our military have always been these great things that people rally behind. So when all of a sudden we hear conversations that immediately rule out our ability to march at a time when we need to connect as a community, and as a nation, with everything that's happened with, you know, even Australia Day celebrations, we need something that's become that national symbol of hope. So I do put a lot of eggs in one basket for Anzac Day, because I feel like we need it as a community, but we need it as a nation. And that's my sort of 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I feel the exact same. I think that, you know, it's a time to remember, and it's not just obviously the veteran community's the ones going to push it, but at the same time, it's got to be the wider community and the families, and just the nation has to say, hey, you know what, it's time to unify and let's push forward. So I know we're starting to round out towards the end. So ESOs, we can touch on them briefly. Obviously, there's ESOs, there's service organisations, there's things like that. From my standpoint, you know, it's like trying to choose a footy team these days, who you're going to align with, and all that sort of issues. I think that's also one of those characteristics that we need to look into. Is right now we've got over 3,000 or 3,500 different service organisations that are trying to achieve the common good. How do we, or if you could wave a magic wand, how would Heston Russell, you know, try and align the ESO community or service organisation community under one banner to create change?
Well, first and foremost, they'd all be given a self-assessment sheet that said, like, what is your purpose?
Yeah.
You know, there are so many fantastic ESOs out there doing the right thing. The unfortunate thing is that the ESO space is now so cluttered that it actually adds to the anxiety outside of service. It adds to the uncertainty. And I know myself, I've never engaged with any in-service. On the way out, you only get to meet ones that your friends, you know, introduce you to. And one of the worst things one of the things we are worst at doing as veterans is actually like marketing and communications and positioning.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest issues. I know people like Matt Brennan here are looking to put things together to help people actually go through the directory of these things, which is exactly what we need. But my biggest issue, again, frog in hot water over the last 5 months of this ESO space, is actually the accountability piece. And I said that about purpose beforehand. When I was a kid going to Sunday school, I remember the minister gave a sermon once that said, the bricks and mortar are not the church, the people are the church. And the purpose of our ESO community is meant to be for the people. And too often now, I keep engaging with some of the most senior ESOs, and their purpose is clearly not the people. Because if it was, they'd probably close themselves down. They'd probably spend half of the millions of dollars in their bank account to canvassing the veterans, seeing who they're engaging with, and supporting those smaller but more effective and more efficient and more purely authentic in their purpose ESOs. And that's a byproduct of the simple fact of the structure, whereby, for those who don't know, you know, the ESOs sit in this space. And in order to receive their funding, they apply for grants up to DVA and government, and they have to provide reporting to DVA and government for those grants. And then they have to provide their reporting to ACNC for their charitable status. Who is canvassing the veterans to find out which ESOs they're engaging with and how effective those ESOs are in supporting them? Because the ESOs are happily providing their testimonials up to receive their funding and their grants, but who is objectively bringing together the veteran community, over 600,000 or 700,000 veterans now in Australia, and seeing who they're engaging with, who's supporting them, and then allocating funding in accordance to that? We're not, because we're being lazy.
Absolutely.
And those big organisations that are fantastic at their marketing and advocating and being that token symbol people and companies can put on there, yes, we support veterans, these are our organisations. That's it, that's crap. And that's the number one thing I've found, you know, reaching out with Voice of a Veteran. Voice of a Veteran was literally a social media platform and brand that I needed to feel comfortable putting myself out there to have these conversations. Now, I need to somehow and want to work with as many people as we can to, there's no national membership for veterans. You know, RSLs are fractured by states and their constitutions are not going to change. And the number one thing that has been brought out by everything that I've essentially been doing in speaking out is that people want to speak out and have a voice, and they need to, or they feel hopeless and helpless. So at the moment, when you're in service, you're not allowed to, at the moment, comment on anything on social media or anything because you're going to get charged. And then when you're out of service, you don't know how to speak up because you've never been taught how to. So, you know, mate, we literally get Voice of Veterans, myself and one girl that I employ. She's not a veteran. She's 29. She's fantastic. She keeps me accountable. And there's like 50,000 messages, 80,000 people on our email database just wanting something to put into. And it's not wanting to reinvent anything. It's the need to bring that together, harness the voices of our veteran population, and do things like hold ESOs accountable, like actually provide objective opinion to government, not forming a political party, but achieving that cut through. And
It's a hard one, and you're right there, because it's trying to delineate, because if you look at the service organisations we've got some that are doing some amazing work, that don't have the knowledge when it comes to compliance, et cetera, to be recognised to get funding. So those ones that are doing the greatest good often fall by the wayside, or you look at veteran service associations or things like that don't have they don't know how to create a charter, they don't know how to create a constitution, they don't know how to do that to get their funding. So therefore they fall by the wayside, but they're the ones that are doing the greatest good. It tends to be the ESOs that are at the higher level that should know better, that tend to hold themselves less accountable, because they can market themselves, they can get people in, they can do that.
We're just getting we're getting competitive, and this is it. Like, if this is our purpose, like, why is there ego and competition in it? Like Ian was saying before, you've got fantastic skills in being able to help these people with these compliancy bits and pieces. And the other frog in hot water moment for me is the fact that we have something like 3,000 registered ESOs. So veterans are fantastic at solving problems. The fact that we have 3,000 ESOs popping up means that there's probably a lot of problems that aren't being picked up along the way. That's just sort of me. And as veterans come out like flour into the system, we shake it around, we keep popping up to try and plug these holes. And I would love to work nothing more than with. And for me, I have kept banging my head against the wall, and I'm only 6 months into this, from trying to get sort of top-down approval and support to do this. But culture is from the top down and bottom up. And, bringing people together, and particularly within our veteran community, you don't have to, ridicule someone, but if you essentially brigade people and don't endorse that ESO or that service or that function, it's going to wither on the vine and die. Like, reputation is so huge in our community, and I think that's what we need to do, is stop waiting for people to say, yes, you can do this, and just start bringing people together for the sake of bringing people together, for the sake of connecting, hoping to identify those ESOs that are engaging with that maybe need support, like professional business support, some mutual fundraising, and not try and reinvent the wheel, but do so in a collaborative mindset.
And that's what we're trying to achieve with things like this, like obviously we're about to touch on Voice of a Veteran, but if we can do things like this to raise awareness of your cause or any other causes, here in Canberra. Canberra's got a great representative veteran community, but we hear squat from them. They don't, we want to make sure that our veterans here and Australia-wide are getting a fair representation, because in Canberra, that's where change is enacted. And if we don't have a fair representation and a great representation here in Canberra, then nothing's going to change. And it's people such as yourself and other people that come down from all over the countryside to rally at Parliament House and do things like that we need to be engaging with to promote the veteran community. So the last one that we'll touch off on is Voice of a Veteran. So how did that become? And whilst you're finishing off of that, what's next for Heston Russell?
Again, so like I said, Voice of a Veteran was something that I needed to feel safe putting my story about suicidal ideation and struggles with DVA out there. Once I appreciated that in doing so, I could potentially help others feel safer doing so, and that came from, again, speaking with some of my former guys and just seeing it unlocking these conversations for them. From there, it sort of spiraled with the whole Brereton Report release. My platoon got named by the ABC.
Good timing.
And you know what? It's so fascinating, because particularly with the Brereton Report release and everything, all of a sudden I got thrown into a purpose. And like you said beforehand, it doesn't always have to be adversarial, but I got thrown into, the ABC report that came out and said, from that Marine who heard a pop and November platoon had killed someone, that report was aired live on the 21st of October last year, which was the 8th year anniversary of when we lost Scott overseas. And that night I was meeting with his mum down at the RSL. And I'm just like, you have just fucked with the wrong person. That it doesn't hurt me. It's like, it's hurting them. So I just took to my social media and called them out. And the next thing, the wonders of social media, people grabbed that, introduced me to a producer at Channel 10, and then went from there. And, it's sort of gone from there. But this is it. I'm no longer able to provide physical courage, which is one huge thing I had to get to grips with. And it's so much harder to actually step up and demonstrate this moral courage, but in doing so, it's actually been the most liberating. Because again, it's not for me. You could have my meritorious unit citation, but you can't, target these guys who haven't actually had charges laid or had due process laid, and things like Anzac Day and whatever. So Voice of a Veteran has been fantastic for me to, one, give me the strength to want to do that and not just be myself. And two, also just like bring together so much of the community. At the moment, the issue for me is I'm now literally overwhelmed with hundreds and thousands of people who have these emails, have these stories. And at the moment, that's where I get to see, even if it's not in person, I have the digital sentiment of the community. There's so much hurt and anger going on out there.
Yep.
And it's not just veterans. I have been so buoyed by just how huge the public support is for our veteran community. You know, we talk about the silent majority, sorry. You know, there isn't a day where we don't get at least a couple of hundred, if not 1,000 emails from something happening in defence and just random civilians, random general public emailing say, please let our veteran community know how much we support them. It is huge out there. And again, that's why I get to see this in the digital space, and when things like Anzac Day are so important to try and get this out physically out to the guys and girls.
Yeah, totally. So, where to for Heston Russell?
I don't know. Again, it's results focused. The biggest capability gap I see is that failure to engage with and corral the veteran community for the purpose of supporting it, linking them in and providing accountability to the ESO community, not for the sake of accountability, but for the sake of actually delivering results and service and being more effective and efficient in what we do, and actually provide a voice directly to government. Like I will openly say, unfortunately, along the way, myself personally have become too politicised in this. I need to like step aside and help set up ESO to do that. That is a board of members, and I will happily be the person championing that. But everyone is sitting here saying, you know, I met with a whole bunch of politicians today to try and talk about a few things, and everyone's like, what are you going to do? You know, this party, that party, whatever. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go into politics. You know, I literally would love people's feedback. It's like, I want to help solve this veterans problem. You know, I don't have the ability to solve it myself. I just know at the moment I have been able to corral enough trust that I know that I can put to use and continue to grow upon, because it's actually not about me.
I mean, it's finding where you can do the greatest good. You know, that's a thing, whether that be in politics or whether that be voice of a veteran.
Every string I pull keeps leading back to you need to have some form of a presence in Parliament. I tell you what, people like Jackie Lambie have been some of the biggest supporters, because she literally burns herself out doing it. You know, she's learned so much along the way, and she's the first to say that, you know, she's made a lot of mistakes along the way. But there's also like this, as a professionally trained leader with leadership, you know, back to my RMC days, all I keep seeing, even when I engage with and go to Parliament House, is a bunch of individuals that form parties. I don't see teamwork. I don't see an environment. I don't see individuals that I want, if I ever had kids, people looking up to and saying, you know, they are leaders with leadership. I see leaders with authority. I see leaders who rule with politics, which is manipulation as opposed to motivation. So there's a part of me who wants to get in there and see if I can maintain being true and authentic. But like, if I do that, am I going to be able to do what I really, as you can probably tell, emotionally like want to do for our community? Or will I, so look, I'm an open book, and I'm not into these games of holding off on whatever. It's so funny, again, you go up into the Parliament, into the Senate, and you sort of get those feelings of that imposter syndrome creeps in, wanting to hold yourself back. But everything that has taught me from my moment in August through to now is that I just have been the only one holding myself back. And if you're doing something for the right reason, make sure you bring all others along with you. But like, get amongst it or do it. Otherwise, live in regret. All
right.
So sorry, I don't have an answer.
That's fine, mate. That's fine. Look, we'll close it off there with the me being up here Q&A-ing. You keep a hold of your microphone, because I'll hand across to Ian, and Ian will ask if anyone has any questions from the audience, etc., etc. But from myself personally, mate, fantastic, and thanks for providing me the time to have a chat. Not only veteran space, but obviously it allows me to come full circle, and it's been fantastic. So I'll hand across to Ian, and Ian can close off and do what he needs to do.
Look. Thank you, Heston, and thank you, Chris. If you've got a question, now's a great time to just top your hand up, and I'll just wander up and ask you to say your name and ask the question. The guys will answer it. Have we got any volunteers today? Oh, we've got a couple. So, okay, let's have a look. Beauty before age. Shall I go? Here we go. If you don't mind just saying your name and then going forward.
Hi guys, my name's Donna Manton. I'm interested in your view of the issues that you've found with DVA. Is it an issue of DVA not being able to rapidly adjust its processes and policies, or is it a matter of them not being resourced to do what their remit is, or a combination of both? Where do you actually see that problem lying?
So I'm always hesitant to comment on things I haven't had lived experience. I only have lived experience on the outside as a customer, as a client, and all that I can see from my critical analysis is that it is so well structured and stovepiped and set in stone that it is just, they're the first people that you engage with to admit that they're so handicapped by how structured they are. And the word dynamic is nowhere near what they're able to provide. And that's where, for me, I see DVA being a great resource. If consolidated, can really churn and burn through liability and compensation and claims. But as far as its ability to adapt and respond to the immediate veterans' needs, let alone care for people and communicate to them while doing it, that's where they stumble and fall. And that's where we're actually burning them out by trying to make them do that and be adaptable. They need to like sink in place, or we need to step up another structure. I don't have the answer, but as far as being resourced, I mean, look, Voice of Veterans cost me about $60,000 out of personal money over 5 months. And if I had $15 billion in the last financial year, I mean, it's very, very different, but I don't know how much more resource you can get. And as we know, and as I now know in the corporate space, you can pour as much money into something, but if it's not the right people and the right processes and the right purpose, you're just wasting your money. And that's why I don't feel like pouring any more money into it. There really needs to be a critical review, piece by piece assessment and restructuring and breaking down of so much of the rigidity in that organisation, again, just from a consumer perspective.
Hi, I'm Michael Carroll, and just going on from that question, given your concerted and persistent interactions so far with the DVA, do you really think they can improve?
I mean, I think everything can improve. It just has to want to improve. You know, again, when I met with Liz's team, you know, there were the right people in there with the right experience. And again, at least the words they said to me were the right things. And then I look at their budget, you know, and then I look at, you know, the potential authority they have to take action. Absolutely. But I mean, this is the key thing as well, then just taking a step back and bringing it into our community. I've said this to both organisations, DVA and the RSL, the best thing they could do immediately to be effective is go through a complete rebranding exercise. You know, they've lost trust on a marketing and communication perspective with the veteran community. And that just is what it is. Unfortunately, it's at that point. So knocking things down and building them back up might be the best way to do it. I don't, again, know what that looks like because in the meantime, there's still this huge body of work that needs to be done supporting our veterans.
I've just got one more question. Now I've got the mic. Just to take a step back regarding suicides, do you know if there's more suicides in the clandestine forces community, including submariners, than the general defence population?
I don't know, personally. Yeah, the issue is that probably mainly most of them in service, so you could go back and track through, but then it's the, remember, it's the whole out of service piece. So suicides within defence are definitely a bit of a separate beast. There's some that I can relate a little bit, you can relate a little bit back more to some of the triggers that are experienced by those in regular society. It's really identifying that difference from in service to out of service. I don't have the answer to that because unfortunately, you know, most of that data of the question, I don't really, I wouldn't try and dance around that. I just don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Hey, thank you.
Anybody else? There we go. Oh no, right behind you.
Chivalry's not dead. Good.
Hi, my name's Samara. I have 2 questions, one super quick. Do you also invite the ministers or people from the Department of Vets Affairs to these more informal talks where they might hear you, I mean, good luck trying to get them to come along, but where they might hear you speak maybe more relaxed and also see people's responses rather than having the formal meetings with them? I mean, if I came here and worked from the department, I would go away absolutely impassioned, wanting to make changes and do something. Obviously, you can't make them come, but do you invite them to these
So that
more informal events?
Yeah, that round table I had with Liz and her team on the 16th of October, and the 2 calls beforehand were me like still in a pretty emotive state, and saying all these things. And I just went back through my own experience line by line and gave them, hey, this is how this made me feel. This is how this could have been fixed. And again, that's what I was saying, you know, 2 of the ladies in that conversation, you know, one got brought to tears and said, you know, you've really re-sparked my desire and love for this job. Then I just don't see action. So, I don't know if there's like direct invitation. That's a good takeaway. But I mean, this one's filmed as well, so there was.
So essentially, obviously, that's a question similarly to us. So we're hosting the event on behalf of Voice of a Veteran. This was an open invite sent out through Eventbrite, obviously, and obviously there's no doubt that anyone from DVA could have attended. It was sent out purely. I know that Ian handled some invitations that went out, and I also spoke to someone, would have been a week ago, when they asked me, there's an event happening March 17th that I believe DVA is hosting. Whoever was on the other end of the phone has said to pass on the message to Liz and Don that this event would be happening, and obviously we can't drag them here by the ear or anything like that, but they're more than welcome. And this, like I said, it's going to be a monthly event. If anyone from DVA wants to come and thinks that they can affect change in the space that they're in, more than happy to host them. It's not just the veteran community, it's people affected by veterans that have been affected, or if you're in a place that can affect change, more than happy.
The other question I just wanted to ask you is a bit more on, I guess, on the emotional side of things. When you talk about how you need to go about it while you're in the Defence Forces and doing your job, and when you almost have to switch on and off your emotions, have you found ways that have been effective for you, or have you spoken to your mates to find ways that help get back in touch with your emotions after you leave, and how to regulate them? I know it's probably a pretty deep topic, but if you could just touch on that, if there's ways that you've found effective to reconnect with your emotions and in a healthy way that they're not then overwhelming.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think key part for me was I sort of allowed myself to get that place whereby I ended up leading by my emotions, and then even learning, understanding how I feel value. Like, you know, I go back to the good old love languages. You know, my acts of service is the way in which I show love or I show value. And I used to think that words of affirmation was the way I received it, but things like COVID, lockdown in 2020 actually taught me that the way I actually feel value from others is quality time. From having people around me who just want to be around me for the sake of being around me, you know, just to like be your friend as opposed to want something from you. And even just that little trip, understanding like what I needed in my life, really helped me to remove a lot of those external influences. But then through to, and you know, back when the last position I had at Special Forces Training Centre, I was responsible for running the Commando and Special Forces Support Staff Selection course. And it was during a time where we went through a big reformation piece and really got some high tech on, particularly the emotional quotient and emotional regulation side of the houses. And one of the first lessons we taught the guys once they passed the course was stress recognition and regulation. You know, that was from actually understanding what your body goes through and those reactions when you're actually feeling stress, from, you know, clammy hands, heart rate, you actually start breathing shallow and things like this, and teaching them stuff including power poses, but also just about coming back to breath and regulating breath. And it's all this stuff that I was responsible for teaching and facilitating, and then particularly when I started to find myself actually identifying these things, diving back into and defaulting to my level of training. And that breath and stress mitigation's been a huge thing for me. Like, breathing exercises are a staple for me. Even before coming up here to talking to you all, waking up in the morning. Another huge part for me is actually the good old mobile phone, social media and all that sort of stuff. You know, from turning all notifications off my phone unless it rings, and I actually engage with those apps and emails when I want to, not when they're blaring at me, through to, you know, the first half an hour in the morning I don't touch my phone. Taking my dog for a walk, you know, I shut off my phone, things like this. Just my need to actually live in the moment. That's the biggest thing I've found, is that being an expert planner, being what we are in the military, always looking forward. You know, everything you're doing here and now is in order to, as opposed to I am here now and there is no order in order to. Finding how to take space in that moment has been the hardest thing for me. I'm honestly not the best at looking back and reviewing things. You know, I'm always planning and looking forward, and I love that because everything comes to capability, but learning how to live in the moment and actually appreciate that just trying to be happy is one of the most amazing things. And it doesn't come from money, it doesn't come from any of the other things that I've tried, but just, and again, for me, it's like I put so much stock on my dog, but you know, literally sitting there and watching something that is just so happy in the moment. You know, anyone who's had like a small child, they tell me it's the same thing. It's there in the moment. They're not planning about, you know, investing in the next property. They're not planning about what they're going to wear to dinner tomorrow. They're looking at you, enjoying that moment. And it's really been the number one thing for me to do. Like at the moment, my headspace is actually here in this moment, not thinking about, you know, the full schedule I've got on tomorrow and things like that. And I'm really actually enjoying realizing that here and now with you. And that's such a hard thing to train because we are indoctrinated in always thinking and looking forward. So that's been a huge part for me, and it helps to relieve that anxiety. You know, I don't really get depressed unless I drink too much, but that anxiety is actually the hardest part, you know, and particularly thinking that you're not going to maximize the maximum amount of opportunities. That's when I really get down in the dumps, as opposed to failing. I'm happy to fail, but not maximizing those opportunities. So a few physical things, a few routine things. I mean, fitness has also been a huge thing for me. Reconnecting with my community, finding people that I can have conversations with who get me, you know, as opposed to, you know, particularly jumping out of special forces. I put myself in the closet my whole career as well. It wasn't something that connected with me. So when I jumped out of defence, I jumped out to a completely different lifestyle that I didn't want my former guys to know about. Not because ever since then they've been nothing but supportive, but I didn't want them to think that I in some way was hiding something from them and betrayed their trust, particularly all the trust they put in me. So I just kept isolating myself. And for 2 years, you know, no one ever knew I was in the military or in special forces or whatever. And just reconnecting with my guys and being able to have those conversations like we had back in the day is just absolutely incredible, and making sure that that is a weekly routine as opposed to saving up for my psychologist or psychiatrist session once or twice a week. You know, I'm having regular conversations that are my mental fitness conversations, that are my decompression conversations. And it's all these things like breathing and speaking that are the number one therapy for me. And it sounds so stupid, but that's why I'm just trying to get out there as much and say this stuff, because you can actually start working on this stuff today as opposed to waiting for a prescription for it. Good question. Thank you for that.
Michael Kruger, fellow veteran, served with Heston and both Chris in 2RR, so it's great to see these two fine gentlemen up there sort of representing the veteran community. And it's great to finally see an officer standing up and supporting all members of the Defence Force, because I think Heston would be the first officer I've seen in a long time doing that. So well done to you, Heston. So look, currently there's 3 Royal Commissions running at the moment, investigating aged care, which is a big part of the population, investigating national disaster arrangements, which affects pretty much everyone in the country, and also investigating the treatment of people with disabilities. Yet there seems to be a real struggle to get a Royal Commission stood up, and a real pushback from both political parties, or all politicians, to stand that up. And it's my feeling that the veteran community just isn't a big enough voter base for them to care. You know, and it's the same with Anzac Day. Like, everyone wants to see the AFL. Let's stand up the AFL matches. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone wants to go to the Boxing Day shopping. All right, that's fine. We can cram 300,000 people into Sydney Plaza. All right, but we can't stick 20,000 people on an Anzac Day march, because the veteran community are just not a large enough voter or percentage of the population for the politicians to give a shit about. So that's my take. I was just wondering whether that rings true with you or with anyone else in the room.
No, I'm with you, and I definitely have been sitting in that boat and thinking that as well. And the thing that I realise is, you know, we're going to have this question finally come out on the census to try and establish how many veterans there are in our community, which is incredible. We don't even know that, but the figure's actually somewhere between 600 and 700,000. And that's veterans themselves. And again, like I was saying beforehand, if there's anything that strikes the chord of people, it's our veteran community. And of those 600,000 or 700,000 veterans, they're the ones living. There are those who are passed, and then there's families, and then there's their families, and there's their families. And when you actually start doing the numbers, it's a very, very large voter base. That what we have been doing and what we're not good at doing is communicating. and voicing our concerns. And we're not good at doing that at an individual level. We're even worse doing that collectively. And the time now is to do it. And on the Royal Commission side of the House, so Labor is now completely all for the Royal Commission. And I meet with another couple of people tomorrow, and very shortly there may very well be a open question to the government to truly decide and demonstrate who is for this Royal Commission at an individual level. Twice now the National Commissioner Bill has been blocked in the Senate hasn't passed with majority in the Senate because unfortunately the National Commissioner Bill is now being the leverage piece for Royal Commission. As opposed to, yes, get the National Commissioner out there now doing her job, the government's offering that as instead of a Royal Commission. So now it's become completely politicised. Whereas if there was that communication, and yeah, again, the Prime Minister tomorrow can stand up and call a Royal Commission. So that's part of what I'm doing here in Canberra, is to work with those to help them better understand the narrative as to why we need a Royal Commission, even just based on my personal story and continued experience alone, let alone all those others. And I'm up there, and I met with Julianne Finney today as well, and just to help them remove the politics from it and start putting the personality and the individual and the emotion and the actual on-the-ground stories to them. And I think in the very near future, you're going to see the requirement for our politicians to decide where they sit on this subject. Yeah, we shall see. We'll see if they care enough. And I honestly think, look, the number one thing I said to my father when I was first speaking up about this, because he's the number one person to say, look, mate, it's a big beast, you're not going to get it. And I was like, look, if I can't make this a election topic, then I think I'm selling myself short. And I don't know many others who could in the young community, just with the profile that I've been able to build. And that's a responsibility, that's not an entitlement. And that's a challenge I look to. All that I simply want is steps to be taken to help fix the problem. I don't want it to be politics. I don't want it to be votes for me or anyone else other than fixing this problem that needs the diligence and needs, as a cultural mindset, we need, like, veterans would be so much more benefited by the fact the government says, look, we value your service, we're going to have this Royal Commission, we want to work with you on moving forward because we need capability because there's so many other big problems that are going to be facing our country very, very soon. But instead, we're caught in this politics cycle that now makes veterans feel like there's this lack of respect coming towards them, as opposed to, let's wipe the slate clean, let's get this done and let's crack on. If we had have done that when it was first raised at the start of last year, we'd already be into that period now. Anyway.
My name is Hugh Pote. It's nice to hear that you're seeing some politicians to try and get the Royal Commission underway. But the Rolling Commission has been established, as I understand it, even though the legislation's been blocked in the Senate. The Commissioner herself is being paid to do the job. What has she done, if anything, are you aware of?
So you're right. Yeah, I met with Dr. Boss. She's been travelling around the country and doing a few roundtables, and then they're having this, I think it's on the 17th of next month, having this meet and greet down here. And this is the unfortunate piece that I've learned very quickly, including with my engagements going into DVA and all that. There's all these meetings, there are all these committees, there are all these actions that look like it's being done. And I don't know what she's been doing behind the scenes. Like, I know she really actually is taking to this and has a due diligence, but from a overarching strategy, I just see this as another token thing that isn't actually, doing enough. It's doing what's needed. It's doing enough in order to potentially give the demonstration they are doing something.
Yeah, look, as I think everybody's aware, there was a Senate Select inquiry into this very issue in 2017. That inquiry made 24 recommendations. To the best of my knowledge, not a single one has been implemented. So we just keep getting this, these new suggestions coming forward rather than looking at some very good points that have been put forward at very high levels at Senate inquiry level, but nothing's being done. I get the impression that they're stalling tactics. But why are we allowing them to do this? It would be nice if you could get some support from some of these other ESOs. I'm so pleased to see that you are taking such a high-profile role in doing it. But it would be nice if there's anybody here from any other ESOs who could give Heston some support, because we really need to get this underway, because people are topping themselves all the time. Yeah. And it must stop. We must find out what the underlying cause is. I think most of us have got a fair idea what it is, and it has to do with DVA, but DVA is the recipient of damaged property. So we need to make sure that that property is not further damaged. Yeah. That's priority number one. Priority number two, in my view, is to get some of the recommendations implemented that have already been made. And we're going back 4 years. What's been done? Absolutely nothing.
And that's it. You hit it right on the head, particularly as far as recommendations that have been written that have not been actioned. And I keep bringing these up, and I've written letters and I'm going in there having these conversations with people. It's like, why do we need more research? You always need research. You always need to maintain your relevancy and dynamicism, the ability to react to what is needed. But when there's, I read back through Jesse Bird's report, and I trace similar things in my experiences. I read back through the Productivity Commission report that's, commissioned by the government to do it. And the one recommendation we've seen done is the Joint Transitional Authority. I've reached out and engaged with General Stothard that many times, offering to support with them, but instead they're going and contracting PwC and not listening to a lot of veterans who are speaking out in this conversation. There seems to be this, we know boats, or we're going to continue doing this, or be seen to doing things. And that's where, the manoeuvrous approach is, Australia Day, I was up in Townsville with Bob Catter and Jackie Lambie. Bob doesn't know it, but he wants to know it. And now that he has known it, he is in there now, and particularly with, what's his name? Who's Mr. Kelly, is it? The guy, Craig Kelly, now coming from that party, and the balance of power in the lower house now changing, Bob's out there advocating and speaking to other people to rally support behind this, and meeting with more and more people. It comes down to that in there. And to go back to the first part of the question, we have an election coming up. This is the best way the Australian people can actually get involved, to actually care about their votes. I'm seeing it here and now that who we put in that lower house and upper house is who we hand over responsibility to solving these problems for. But at the same time, that's at election time. In the meantime, there's still our representatives. And some of the best impact we have had is by putting emails and calls out to those who've engaged with us to write to their local member, because it's not just at voting time. These people are our representatives all year round, and to voice these concerns, because as soon as they start to feel that there is any potential impact on the numbers that are their support base, they will start to go into preservation mode regardless of what party they are within. And be that whether they don't vote against, but they very at least abstain with some of these key things that might be coming through, that is where we're able to help solve these problems at our individual level. And that's what I just ask people to do and support. Cool.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions?
Sorry, Jenny. I guess following on from what you've just said, obviously you've asked us to contact our local representatives, whatever else. What other things can we as individuals be doing to help fix this issue?
Look, if you know a veteran, again, we take this for granted, and I really need to kick myself at the start that, I know this crowd is actually filled with other veterans, and I sincerely want to thank you for your service. And, we have Podi's family here. They lost their son in Afghan 2012 when I was over there, and their family has paid the ultimate sacrifice. And the fact that they're still here and engaged with the veteran community is absolutely huge. And I really want to say my absolute thanks to you, absolutely. I know many in this room have served themselves and have lost others. And, we don't want to be recognised for that service. We just want to know that there's the potential for people not to really think that, veterans are broken. There's all this negative narrative out there. And the number one thing I say to people who ask me that question is, if you know a veteran, please engage with them and please thank them for their service. They'll probably be terrible at accepting that compliment, and that's fine, but keep on it. And don't just do it tokenly. As you see things in the media, please feel free to just question those and apply your own common sense to it. And as opposed to making up your own opinion or idea, like go and speak with them and make them have that conversation. And every veteran, it's our responsibility to help educate the Australian public. This has been the biggest thing about this Brennan report coming out. It's highlighted how much the Australian people don't know what we did over there. And I love that, because we were there to defend Australia and its national interests. That's physically, mentally and emotionally. I don't want my family knowing half the stuff we saw over there. But when it's now in the public, and now the reputation of our people has been dragged in the public, it is our responsibility to help educate that piece. So engage with any veterans that you know, thank them for their service. And when there are any questions that come through all the media or things that make you question things, like please engage with them to have those conversations and know that they would love to actually engage with you. It might be a bit hard for them again, but also you're going to be helping them as a part of that mental fitness decompression as well, because we need to make all of these conversations more normal, not just those around mental health. Cool. Keep your money and just talk to people, seriously.
Well, I just wanted to make a few comments. I hear a lot of what you say about meeting Ms. Cosson and others. I've been on sort of focus groups, scoping groups, committees, and it's all this wonderful talk. We're doing this, we're improving this, we've got this app for this and that. But when I meet the veterans, it's not that simple. It's like reject, reject, and if you can hang in there long enough and fight it, you might end up getting somewhere. But it's reject first, the way I see it from veterans that I speak to, and that's disturbing, because I've known some that say, I give up, I can't take this anymore. And then it leads to all the other issues you have, and potentially suicide, because you know, the wives or partners struggle with this. They're the carers, they're worried about their children, your state of mind, your anger, and then eventually there's no point to anything, so they take their lives. And I think it goes back to a lot of the rejection sort of nonsense that DVA seem to do. But I keep getting all these lovely comments, and you know, like
working groups,
you know, that I've sort of met.
And,
yeah, and I just said I've had enough of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up with results. It's just easy speak.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the whole part. You know, I feel these cliches like keep your friends close, your enemies closer. Sometimes I feel like it. You know, the first time I engaged with Liz and really got wild with them, they offered me a job.
We've heard this before. We've come across this.
Yeah, but this is what I said. I was like, the best thing I can do is actually work with you and help maintain some of that trust in the veteran community. But you know, all I see is more people getting employed that speak out, and it's just, look, again, I just want to focus on that true and authentic purpose. And as we know, we can only talk for so long, and then you start to get fed up.
You just, give up. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Hi, Heston. I just wanted to ask you about the definition of a veteran. Oh, sorry, my name's Kai, and I'm a veteran supporter. Because there's a lot of confusion. You talk a lot about the sense of identity and purpose while you're serving, and then when you get out, you're questioning your sense of purpose and identity. Yeah. And sometimes I think that's linked to the fact that a lot of veterans that we've spoken to have said things like, oh, I'm not a veteran, I'm not worthy to be a veteran, I haven't done this or that or served for that long. Yeah. How do we change that narrative around the definition of a veteran, so you know that everyone is considered to be a veteran and worthy to be a veteran?
Absolutely. I think you missed my little chat at the start, but no, you're fine. No, this is what I said. Every single person who has volunteered a single day of service is a veteran, and that's the official standing per DVA. But that is the official standing per, you know, this is my opinion and my personal experience in service, whereby you sign up for service. You don't sign up for anything else that comes along other than making sure that you are the best at your job and the most highest level of operational preparedness you can be to go and support your country. You know, again, I said before, my father did 20 years and went to Butterworth once, then he got back out and got back in and did, you know, more deployments within a shorter space of time to Afghanistan and Iraq, you know. People don't get to pick and choose, and the worst part is, like you're saying before, you know, the hardest part for me to actually live with is the fact that I'm never going to be as cool as I was as a commando. Like, that's it. I'm never going to have that level of responsibility, that teamwork, that mateship, that just mastery of physical, mental and emotional skill sets. And let alone for those who complete their service and then don't even feel they have connection to the community after service because they haven't been in that position themselves. And I was fortunate to be deployed to Afghanistan. I didn't go over to Afghanistan and start a war and then come back to Australia and join the military and go over there to deploy. Like, You can't control these things. So the biggest thing to identify, first and foremost, is that if you sign up to serve, you sign up for uncertainty, you sign up for service, you sign up for a story that could have your life end tomorrow, that could have your life end a month from now, that could have you live a beautiful long life and never have to fire your weapon in anger, but you signed up for the opportunity, the potential for that to occur. And that's it. And for me, that makes you a better person than 99% of those who haven't done that, simply because you have taken the chance to do that. And I don't mean that in the way to put anyone else down. You know, we all have our own opportunities, and it takes all requirements to make the world go around and make sure we can live in this country safe and happy. But knowing what the extremes are, requiring people to literally put their own lives as their last priority, and seeing that firsthand and how magnificent that made people, and then coming back and seeing those people who could have readily been able to do that themselves but never had the opportunity, just makes me know and celebrate that that whole Anzac spirit I talk about is that selflessness, that signing up to service that people do. And that's what is being celebrated when we say veteran, the fact that you signed up to the uncertainty. And it comes down to veterans better supporting each other and not putting up obstacles and embracing each other. And look, the whole thing also is, being a veteran doesn't entitle you to anything. This is the biggest thing that I actually really have issue with in a lot of bits and pieces in life these days: responsibility versus entitlement. I don't expect anything because I'm a veteran. It's actually a responsibility I have to carry forward, because I was provided the opportunity and I worked with one of those and worked within one of those cultures that was one of the most pure that I wish we could still operate in outside of service. And it's my responsibility to abide by those values that saw me push through to excellence and saw others push through to excellence during service. To sit back and say, I'm a veteran, you know, honour and respect me. No, that's not what we do. That actually goes against all those values we spoke of. So if people have an issue calling themselves a veteran, they need to look at it. Hey, if you serve, you have a responsibility to demonstrate what a veteran is here and now and today. You know, nothing you did in your past helps to determine what you do today and tomorrow. You are a veteran. The government says you're a veteran. Heston Russell says you're a veteran. If anyone says otherwise, to come and see me. No. But I tell you what, if you're going to be a veteran and call yourself a veteran, you better act the way that you need to today and tomorrow. I need to put down my soapbox. Let's go. I'm getting anxiety now.
Yeah, g'day. Chris Hall. I as well served with Heston and Chris. Heston was actually my platoon commander when I first marched into the 2nd Battalion. So about 18 months ago, I had just basically been running it till the wheels fell off, and finally came to the realisation that I needed help, and called Open Arms, and they said, great mate, that's good, you've called us. It's going to be 11 weeks until you can see someone. Now, that just basically felt like getting the door slammed in my face, and I hung up the phone. I didn't know what to do next. It wasn't for the insistence of my partner to say, you know, reach out to your godfather if he's a Vietnam veteran, go and see him and have a chat. That a week later, I was sitting in front of a psychologist because I managed to get through a back door through the RSL, and someone made a phone call for me. I was lucky I had that support, but a lot of other veterans, if they get to that point, and a lot of us, we do get to the point where the wheels are actually falling off before we reach out for that help. I'd like to know what can be done more on the government side of things, more incentives for health providers, psychologists, psychiatrists, to actually take on more veterans. And you know, there's a big backload of people that need to be seen, and an 11-week wait is far too long when you're at a crisis point. And that's the number that you're supposed to call as a veteran. You're told to call when you need help. It's not good enough.
So that's, mate, I need you to write down your story, put it in an email, and like give it to me, and I'll put it on Senator Lambie's desk. You know, that's just unacceptable. Yeah. You know, need to actually work with you to provide these things. You know, backstepping from that, the issue at the moment is too many of us are saving it up to when we do need that critical point. That's why I'm trying to do as much as we can now to proactively engage in those mental fitness sessions, communicating with each other, making sure it doesn't save up to that period. But unfortunately, this is the whole thing. We're going to face more and more of this, particularly coming out of 2020, with everyone's realising they need mental fitness training, not just a personal trainer, and resources are so stretched and overwhelmed. But you're right, I mean, more also education on reaching out to other forms and methods. Like, were you provided with other options, or you just provided that it's going to take 11 weeks? Yeah. What was the?
No, it was basically just, yeah, it's going to be 11 weeks. We'll have someone call you back in a few days and just check how you're going, sort of thing. And
Yeah,
that was all I got. And then, yeah, like I said, spoke to my godfather. He got me to sit down with one of his Vietnam war buddies, who was luckily the Woden sub-branch RSL president. And yeah, he was able to make a phone call, and I got to see someone a week later. And that was, but as far as other options or other avenues, you know, provided to me at that point, there was nothing but just, you know, hang in there, buddy.
So this is the best thing like you can do, you know, yourself. You know, we're taught to sort of help provide solutions even to our own problems. So I'd like ask you to write down your experience, how that made you feel, how that could have been more beneficial, and then, you know, we'll give that to the head of Open Arms, we'll give that to whoever at DVA, and then I'll wait their response. Like, we have to provide this feedback, and in a constructive way, and unfortunately that's like the best we can do at the moment. And then, you know, as you see, there's plenty of other veterans out there who will help mobilise around you. And even just that conversation, for anyone watching this like later, you know, don't accept no for an answer. Reach out to another veteran. The first point of call has to be like another veteran 9 times out of 10 when you hit a roadblock, because there is definitely nothing that I have yet learned that someone else hasn't already in some way had that experience. And particularly at the moment, mate, the Vietnam vets are some of the absolute best guys who have been reactivated and energised by everything that's going on at the moment, and are some of the biggest workhorses supporting me behind the scenes at the moment. And, you know, even in the culture they're doing from some of these associations, losing their Vietnam veterans tag to just carry the veterans tag, and they are the ones that are the worst at marketing and communicating themselves, but are rolling up their sleeves and getting shit done. And this is this huge opportunity at the moment. I know I keep dreaming big, people, I'm sorry, but to like really reconnect across the whole veteran community through this combined adversary that is literally history repeating for some of them. It's actually this awesome opportunity to bring our community together. We just need to actually engage with them and start reaching out and do it. And that's again why I put big stock in things like Anzac Day, because it finally physically brings these things together. And anyway, you're going to have to do that, Holly. This is not just me as your former platoon commander telling you that. I'm going to hold you to that.
Hey, Heston, Matt Brennan, I think we know each other. Thank you for your service, mate, and Chris and Ian, and thanks for everything you're doing for veterans. It's fantastic. We spoke and heard you speak about values and trust in particular. Our view, given what we're learning in SurveyLink, is that there is a number of larger, very capable ESOs out there. However, they're losing a bit of, and have lost a lot of trust and credibility and reputation amongst the community. And you touched on it earlier. What do you think, in terms of trust, are some of the things they can be doing proactively to start to try and turn things around and win back our community of all ages, so that they can retain that relevance and enhance the support?
I think the biggest point, a really good question, and for those who don't know, Matt is heading up SurveyLink, which is a product, a program looking to actually finally put all of those ESOs together in what's it called, a catalogue essentially. So, yeah, a service catalogue, so people can actually see where things are. Because you know what, that's half the problem, is people don't know where all this stuff is. But to answer your question, Matt, I would say like the time for talk is done, the time for action is needed. And, you know, even just for a quick example, a lot of people don't know, like even the Anzac Day parades, most of them weren't actually called off by government. They were sort of called off on advice of RSLs. And I immediately, upon hearing those announcements, I called representatives in the Victoria RSL. I called representatives, I called and spoke with the Secretary of RSL New South Wales, and I've spoken with RSL Queensland. I haven't yet spoken with RSL Tasmania. And each of those conversations, I was met with justification to the context of our ageing veteran communities at the highest risk from this disease. We need to protect them. Of which I went, our young veteran community is at the lowest risk to this disease, but is at the highest risk to impacting from these being cancelled for their mental health. And it was just even like this mindset wasn't even a consideration. There's a number of things in that. Myself and other young veterans have dropped the ball and not engaging with these things before they come down to decision points. That has come from a place of not having trust in them. So it has to go two ways. But first and foremost, a lot of these large ESOs are sort of at that place of potentially being overtaken, and all they're relying on is having money and assets and prestige. And if there's one thing I've learned in the last year or two is all the money in the world doesn't buy you happiness. And it doesn't take a lot to make veterans feel valued. It's just getting out there and doing it. And if, again, you ask me for the golden solution, Matt, the RSLs are the best in place to be the service providers and the owners of the service provision within each state. They need to get out there and proactively engage with those veterans in their states, see who they are going to instead of them, and accept that humble pie and put some of their resources into funding those. And just be seen to be doing that, not for their own positioning, but because it's actually helping veterans. Don't even put the RSL tag on it. Don't even tell people you're doing it. We know in our community, word will leak out that the RSL is actively doing this. You have to rebuild that trust. There's no golden pill for it, but it's coming down off your ivory tower, engaging with the veterans, all veterans, accepting, hey, there's work we need to do and we need to do it together. I don't want to have to work with anyone else helping reinventing things. We have the infrastructure, the resources, everything there. It's just a little bit of humility needed, and working with marketing 101 and embracing what is going to bring the younger veterans in. That's it.